Hi friends, welcome to Pharma Mitra. Let me introduce myself. I'm Ashley Marie and I have came for this initiative out of my experience with the subjects in pharmacy. From my experience as an instructor as well as a researcher in the field of pharmacy, I have found that the students are not getting expertise aids to mold their career. This channel is a small initiative to meet the requirements of the pharma students to familiarize with the concept and make them confident with the subjects. The channel focuses on the students studying at B.Pharm, PharmD as well as M.Pharm level and to substantiate with the career aspects in the healthcare sector. I hope this initiative can help all in preparing for exams as well as to progress in their career. So, I request all to kindly subscribe my channel and to like my sessions. Also, please press the bell icon so that you can get further notifications. Comments are welcomed. You can suggest method to improve the sessions also. The first session starts with the subject Biopharmaceutics and Pharmacokinetics. The portion which is going to be covered in this video is absorption, and the section absorption is divided into introduction part, mechanism of drug absorption, factors affecting absorption, and non-per-oral routes of absorption. The absorption chapter is a wide chapter, so up to the factors affecting, that is physicochemical factors affecting absorption, is discussing in this session. Let's move to the depth of the subject, that is biopharmaceutics and pharmacokinetics. Biopharmaceutics is defined as the study of factors influencing the weight and amount of drug that reaches the systemic circulation. And using this information, we can optimize the therapeutic efficacy. Similarly, the study of factors influencing the rate and amount. In the subjects, we simultaneously use two terms, that is pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. Simply, the pharmacokinetics means the kinetics of ADME. We can go in depth. Pharmacokinetics. Pharmacokinetics means what the body does to the drugs, and pharmacodynamics means what the drug does to the body. I will explain these two terms with the help of an example. If we are ingesting a drug into the body, what are the things that the body does to the drug? That is kinetics, pharmacokinetics. And the effect of the drug to the body can be called as pharmacodynamics. I think you got the point. Next term deal in the subject is clinical pharmacokinetics. Clinical pharmacokinetics means here we are using the pharmacokinetic principles in optimizing the drug dosage to suit individual patient needs and achieving the maximum therapeutic utility. What is absorption? The drug absorption is defined as the movement of unchanged drug from the site of administration to systemic circulation. Following the absorption, we can assess the effectiveness by its concentration of the drug. However, it is difficult to find out the concentration. This is a plot showing that concentration, that is plasma drug concentration versus time profile. Here we can see two curves, one is having higher height and in between we can see some dotted lines. This is minimum effective concentration. That is, to produce an effect by the drug to attain this concentration. That concentration can be termed as minimum effective concentration. That is, the minimum concentration that should be attained by the drug to produce that effect. In the smaller curve, we can see that concentration is not attaining and the drug produces therapeutic failure. But in this case, here the drug is producing therapeutic success by achieving this minimum effective concentration. The drug raises a high and produces its effect, so that we can find the importance of the concentration of the drug. So we have to study each terms and to find the importance of the terms in this subject. That is very important. Next, we are moving to the mechanism of drug absorption. There are main three mechanisms of drug absorption, that is three broad categories. First one, transcellular or intracellular transport, paracellular or intercellular transport, and vesicular transport. First one, transcellular or intracellular transport, can be defined as the passage of drugs across the GI epithelium. It is the most common pathway and three steps are involved in this process. First one, permeation through the GI epithelial cell membrane, which is a lipoidal barrier. This is a major obstacle. Second step, movement across the intracellular space of cytosol. And third step, that is a permeation of the lateral or basolateral membrane. First one, passive transport process. As the word denotes, this process do not require energy than that of Brownian motion. Passive transport process can be classified into passive diffusion, port transport, ion pair transport, and facilitated diffusion. First one, passive diffusion, also called as non-ionic diffusion. It is the major transport process. It is a downhill mechanism. More than 90% of the drug follow this mechanism, and the driving force is concentration gradient. Concentration gradient means the difference in the drug concentration on either side of the membrane. This can be better explained by Fick's first law of diffusion, which states that the drug molecule diffuses from a region of higher concentration to a region of lower concentration until equilibrium is attained, and the rate of diffusion is directly proportional to the concentration gradient. Can be mathematically expressed by dq by dt is equal to dak m by w whole divided by h into cgit minus c, where dq by dt is equal to, that is the rate of drug diffusion, capital D is the diffusion coefficient, and A is the surface area of the absorbing membrane, Km by W is the partition coefficient of the drug between the lipoidal membrane and the aqueous GI fluid. Cgit minus C is the difference in the concentration of the drug in GI fluid and the plasma, and H is the thickness of the membrane. Based on this equation, certain characteristics of passive diffusion can be explained. First one, it is a downhill transport mechanism. The process is energy independent and non-saturable, and the rate of drug is directly proportional to the concentration gradient, and the process is rapid over short distances and slower over long distances. The drug, which can exist in both ionized and unionized form, and approach the equilibrium by transfer of unionized species, and the rate of transfer of unionized species is 3 to 4 times than the rate of ionized drug. The drug diffuses rapidly when the volume of fluid is low. Conversely, the dilution of GA fluid decreases the drug concentration. This phenomena can be explained or made in use in case of oral overdose or poisoning. The process is dependent on the square root of the molecular size of the drug, that is, the drugs having the molecular weight, that is, 100 to 400 Daltons, are effectively absorbed passively. But there is an exception in the case of cyclosporine A, that is, it is a peptide of molecular weight of 1200, that is, absorbed over. Once the drug passively absorbed, it enters the blood, it is rapidly distributed into the larger volume of body fluid. Hence, we can say that concentration is GIT is maintained very greater than C, that is the concentration of drug in plasma, and this condition, that is concentration in GIT greater than concentration of drug in plasma, this condition can be called as a sink condition for a drug absorption. Under usual condition, the terms, that is D, A, K, M by W and H are constant. So, from the above equation, the term dAk by W divided by H, all terms can be replaced by a combined constant, that is P. This P can be called as permeability coefficient. Permeability means the ease with a drug can penetrate or diffuse through the membrane. Due to sink condition, the concentration of drug plasma is very small compared to GIT, so we cannot use this C term. Then the dQ by dt is equal to P into CGIT. This equation can be termed as, that is, first order kinetics is following. Thus, passive diffusion follows first order kinetics. Second transport is pore transport mechanism. Pore transport is also called as convective transport, bulk flow or filtration. This mechanism is responsible for the transport of molecule into the cell through the protein channel in the cell membrane. The characteristic of pore transport are: the driving force is constituted by the hydrostatic pressure or osmotic difference across the membrane, due to which the bulk flow occurs through some aqueous channel, and water flux that promote such a transport is called as solvent drag. This process is important for low molecular weight drugs, that is less than 100 Dalton, low molecular size, smaller than the diameter of the pore, and generally for water soluble drugs through narrow aqueous channel, example in case of urea, water and sugars. Chain-like or linear compounds of molecular weight up to 400 Daltons also absorbed by this method. The drug permeation through this water-filled channel is important in case of renal excretion, removal of drug from CSF, that is cerebrospinal fluid, and entry of drugs into the liver. Third category, that is ion pair transport. Another mechanism that explains the absorption of drugs like quaternary ammonium compound, sulphonic acid, etc., which ionize under all pH condition, that is ion pair transport. This agent penetrates the membrane by forming reversible neutral complexes with the endogenous ion. This can be explained by this figure, that is the cationic drug. This body layer can be divided into three, that is gastrointestinal lumen, membrane, and blood. The lumen, the cationic drug combined with the endogenous anion and form a lock and key mechanism by passive diffusion past the membrane, and by reaching the blood, the dissociation of complex is undergoing and free drug is releasing in the blood. Example for such drug diffusion is in the case of propranolol. This is a basic drug that forms an ion pair with the oleic acid and absorbed by this mechanism. Carrier-mediated transport. Some polar drugs cross the membrane more readily than other mechanisms, and this suggests some mechanism is the specialized transport mechanism without which many essential nutrients are poorly absorbed. The mechanism is thought to involve a component of the membrane, and that component can be called as a carrier. This carrier bind reversibly or non-covalently with the solute molecule to be transported. This carrier solute molecule passes through the membrane to other side, get dissociated, and remove the solute molecule. The carrier in membranes may be proteins, that is transport protein, may be an enzyme or any other component of the membrane. Important characteristic of this carrier-mediated transport are: this carrier protein always has an uncharged outer surface, and the carriers have no directionality, that is, they are effective in both directions. The transport process is structure specific, that is, they have special affinity for the transfer of the drug, like lock and key arrangement. And especially the drugs having the structure similar to essential nutrient called as false nutrient and absorbed by the same carrier mechanism. This is important in case of anti-neoplastic agents like 5-FU and 5-BU, that is 5-fluorouracil and 5-bromouracil, which will act as the. This process is competition is there and is capacity limited process. As the number of carriers are limited, there is competition between the agent having similar structure, and the process is also capacity limited, that is, at higher concentration the system becomes saturated and approaches an asymptote. Such a capacity limited process can be described by mixed order kinetics, also called as Michaelis-Menten saturation, or non-linear kinetics. The specialized absorption or carrier-mediated process occurs from specific site where the number of carriers are reached. Such an area in which the carrier system is most dense is called as absorption window, and such absorption windows are poor candidates for CRF, that is, for controlled release formulation. So while choosing the dose, we have to check whether it is a absorption window area or not. Two types of carrier-mediated transport systems are the facilitated diffusion and active transport. Facilitated diffusion is a carrier-mediated transport system operates down the concentration gradient or downhill transport. The driving force is concentration gradient since no energy is required for the process. Examples for such diffusion process are the entry of glucose into RBC and intestinal absorption of vitamin B1, B2 and B12. Classical example is the GI absorption or vitamin B12. Here there is an intrinsic factor called IF. It is a glycoprotein produced by gastric parietal cells, form a complex with this B12 and transported across the GI membrane by this carrier system. Next one, active transport. This mechanism requires energy in the form of ATP, and this mechanism can be classified into primary active transport and secondary active transport. Primary active transport, there is direct ATP requirement. The process transfer only in one molecule or only in one direction or one ion. Hence it can be called as unipolar. Example, absorption of glucose. Carrier protein involved in this transport are of two types, that is ion transporters or ATP binding cassette transporter or ABC transporters. Ion transport are responsible for transporting ions into and out of the cell. Example, that is proton pump. This is implicated in acidification of intracellular components. Two types of ion transporters are the organic anion transporter, which aids in absorption of drugs such as pravastatin, atorvastatin, etc. And second one, organic cation transporter, which aids absorption of diphenhydramine. Second classification, ATP binding cassette transporters, ABC transporter. These are responsible for small foreign molecule like drugs and toxin, especially out of the cell, that is absorption process. So it is clinically important. Classical example for this process is P-glycoprotein. This is responsible for pumping of hydrophobic drugs, and presence of large quantity of this protein make the cell resistant to wide variety of drugs used in cancer therapy, and that process is called MDR, that is multi-drug resistance, and it is for that reason this P-glycoprotein is called as multi-drug resistance protein. Second category is secondary active transport. In these processes, no direct ATP is required, and the energy required in this process may be either in same direction or in opposite direction. First one, synbord or co-transport, involve the movement of both the molecule in the same direction. Example, in case of sodium glucose transporter or PEPT1. And second one, antipode or counter transport. Here the involve the movement of molecule in the opposite direction. Example, expulsion of hydrogen ions using the sodium gradient in the kidneys. Second broad category is the paracellular or intercellular transport. It is defined as the transport of drug through the junction between the GI epithelial cell. This is of minor importance, and this process involves two steps, that is first one, permeation through the tight junction of epithelial cell basically occurs through the openings which are a little bigger than the aqueous pores. For compounds such as insulin, cardiac glycoside are taken up by this mechanism. Second one is the persorption mechanism, is the permeation of drug through the temporary opening formed by shedding of two neighboring epithelial cells into the lumen. Third broad category of absorption is vesicular or corpuscular transport or endocytosis. Like active transport, these are also energy dependent process but involve the transport of molecule within vesicles into a cell. Vesicular transport mechanisms are of two types, pinocytosis and phagocytosis. Here, the drug is known to be in aqueous solution form. Example for this mechanism is example in case of fat, starch, vitamin B12, etc. This endocytosis process are of two types, that is phagocytosis and pinocytosis. Phagocytosis means the cell eating and pinocytosis means the cell drinking. The example of pinocytosis is in the case of orally administered, that is Sabin polio vaccine, and in the case of botulinum toxin. Next, we are moving to the session that is the factors influencing the GI absorption. Broadly, this can be classified into two, that is pharmaceutical factors and patient-related factors. Among the pharmaceutical factors, main two subdivisions are that is physicochemical properties of drug substance and dosage form characteristic and in pharmaceutical ingredient. Second broad category is the patient-related factors. Pharmaceutical factors. In order to design a formulation, the pharmacist must consider the physicochemical properties of the drug, what type of formulation, whether it is a solution, suspension, tablet, etc., and nature of the excipient used in the formulation. First, we are dealing with physicochemical factors affecting the drug absorption. First factor, the drug solubility and dissolution rate. Consider the events that occur after an oral administration of the drug. The solid dosage form get disintegrated or deaggregated, and the solid drug particles obtained get dissolution. This dissolution is the rate determining step for the lipophilic drug. Then the drug goes in the solution form, permeated, and get the drug in the body. From this we can know there are two critical rate determining processes in the absorption in the case of an orally administered drug, that is the rate of dissolution and rate of drug permeation. Dissolution is the rate limiting step, that is RDS, rate determining step or rate limiting step. Dissolution is the rate determining step for hydrophobic drugs like poorly aqueous soluble drugs like glycyrrolidine, spironolactone, etc. And the absorption of such drugs can be called as dissolution rate limited. If the drug is hydrophilic with high aqueous solubility, example like in case of cromolyn sodium or neomycin, dissolution is rapid. And the absorption of such drugs can be said to be permeation rate limited or transmembrane rate limited. Dissolution rate determining step for hydrophobic drugs, and for hydrophilic drugs, permeation is the rate limiting step. By using this concept, we can come to a new term, that is the concept of MAD, that is maximum absorbable dose. It is a term used to correlate the drug absorption with its solubility by using the equation MAD is equal to Ka into Sgi into Vgi into Tr, where Ka is the intrinsic absorption rate constant, Sgi is solubility of drug in GI fluid, Vgi is the volume of GI fluid present, and Tr is the residence of drug in GI. This equation provides useful calculation for such as calculating the solubility of drug in GIT and intrinsic absorption rate constant. If the projected clinical dose is below this MAD, the drug absorption should not be a limiting factor, whereas if the value is above MAD, there is limited absorption. Based on this intestinal permeability and solubility of drug, the scientists Emidon et al. Introduced or developed this BCS classification, that is Biopharmaceutics classification system, which classifies the drug into 4 groups, that is class 1 to 4. Class 1 is the drug having high solubility and high permeability, which are well absorbed. The rate limiting step is gastric emptying. Example, gluteazone. Class 2 means low solubility and having high permeability. Here the absorption pattern is variable. Dissolution is the rate limiting step. Example, nifedipine. Class 3 is having high solubility and low permeability with variable absorption pattern, and permeability is the rate limiting step. Example, insulin. And the class 4 drugs is having low solubility and low permeability, which are poorly absorbed, and the rate limiting step varying with drugs. Example, in case of Taxol. Next, we are discussing two terms, that is absolute or intrinsic solubility. This absolute or intrinsic solubility is defined as the maximum amount of solute dissolved in a given solvent under standard condition of temperature, pressure, and pH. This is a static property. And second term is the dissolution rate. It is defined as the amount of solid substance that goes into the solution per unit time. It is a dynamic process. Some drugs having low aqueous solubility but different oral bioavailability. Example, in case of cisapride. The reason for that, first one, it is having rapid rate of dissolution, and here the therapeutic dose is small but GI transit time is sufficient for adequate dissolution. Next topic, theories of drug dissolution. Dissolution is a process which solid substances solubilizes in a given solvent. This dissolution can be explained by 3 theories. First one, diffusion layer model or film theory. This is the simplest one and most common theory. Here, the process of dissolution consists of 2 consecutive steps. First one, the solution of solid to form a thin layer at solid liquid interface, that is called a stagnant layer or diffusion layer, which is saturated with the drug. This step is usually rapid. Second one, diffusion from the stagnant layer to the bulk of the solution. That is, we can explain the same thing with this diagram. That is, solid drug particle dissolved in the liquid. This is the solid liquid interface. After some time, the solid get diffused at the solid liquid interface and form a stagnant layer. From the stagnant layer, the diffusion is carrying out, and this step is a slower process, and this is the rate limiting step. This can be explained by using an equation which involves no chemical reaction to explain the rate of dissolution. That is Noyes-Whitney equation. dC by dt is equal to K into Cs minus Cb, where dC by dt is the dissolution rate of the drug, K is the dissolution rate constant, Cs is the concentration of drug in stagnant layer, Cb is the concentration of drug in the bulk of the solution at time t. This equation was based on Fick's second law of diffusion. Next one, Nernst and Brenner equation. This scientist incorporated the Fick's first law of diffusion and modified this Noyes and Whitney equation into dC by dt is equal to dAkW by O into Cs minus Cb whole divided by Vh, where dC by dt, it is the dissolution rate constant, dissolution rate of the drug, d is the diffusion coefficient or diffusivity of the drug, A is the surface area of the dissolving solid, Kw by O is the water in oil partition coefficient of the drug, or dissolution rate constant or intrinsic dissolution rate constant. Cs minus Cb is the concentration gradient for diffusion of the drug, V is the volume of the dissolution volume, and H is the thickness of the stagnant layer. Under sink condition, the dC by dt become a constant, that is K, that is the Nernst and Brenner equation is converted into a constant capital K. This equation represents that dissolution rate is constant under sink condition and follows zero order kinetics. By Noyes and Whitney equation, in that concept the surface area is a constant, but that case is not possible for the dissolving particle. On that concept, the scientists Hickson and Crowell produced a new equation, that is Hickson and Crowell cubic law of dissolution, that is W0 raised to 1 by 3 minus W raised to 1 by 3 is equal to Kt, where W0 is the original mass of the drug, W is the mass of the drug remaining to dissolve at time t, and K is the dissolution rate constant. Second model is the Dangworth model or penetration or surface removal theory. Dangworth did not approve the existence of the stagnant layer. He suggested that there is a turbulence in the dissolution medium at solid liquid interface and produces the mass of eddies, that is simply the surface removal. Third model is the interfacial barrier model, double barrier or limited solvation theory. This model was based on two assumptions. The rate determining step that controls dissolution is a mass transport, and solid solution equilibrium is achieved at solid liquid interface. When considering the dissolution of a crystal, each phase of the crystal will have different interfacial barrier. Such concept can be explained by the equation G is equal to Ki into Cs minus Cv, where G is the dissolution rate per unit area, Ki is the effective interfacial transport constant. Second broad category is the paracellular or Once the drug passively absorbed, it enters the blood, it is rapidly distributed into the larger volume of body fluid. Hence, we can say that concentration is GIT is maintained very greater than C, that is the concentration of drug in plasma, and this condition, that is concentration in GIT greater than concentration of drug in plasma, this condition can be called as a sink condition for a drug absorption. Under usual condition, the terms that is D, A, K, M by W and H are constant. So, from the above equation, the term D, A, K, M by W divided by H, all terms can be replaced by a combined constant, that is P. This P can be called as permeability coefficient. Permeability means the ease with a drug can penetrate or diffuse through the membrane. Due to sink condition, the concentration of drug plasma, based on this structure, the substance can be exist in more than one crystalline form, and these different forms are called as polymorph, and the process is known as polymorphism. These polymorphs are of two types: anisotropic polymorph, that is the one which can be reversibly changed into another form by altering temperature, pressure, etc. Example, sulfur. Monotropic polymorph means which is unstable at all temperature and pressure. Example, glyceryl stearate. Depend on the stability, polymorph are of stable, metastable and amorphous form. The stable form is having the lowest energy, highest melting point and least aqueous solubility. The metastable form is having higher energy state and lower melting point and higher aqueous solubility. The metastable form have greater aqueous solubility and show better bioavailability. Example, in case of chloramphenicol palmitate. This palmitate having three forms, that is existing three forms, that is A, B and C, where B form show best availability and A form is virtually inactive. Third form is amorphous form. Amorphous form means that is having no internal structures. Such drug represent high energy state, can be considered as supercooled liquid having greater aqueous solubility. Example, amorphous form of novobiopsin. By converting into amorphous form, this novobiopsin is 10 times more soluble than the crystalline form. The order of dissolution is that amorphous greater than metastable greater than stable. Fourth factor is hydrate or solvate or pseudopolymorphism. The crystalline form of a drug can either be a polymorph or a molecular adduct or both. The stoichiometric type of adduct where the solvent molecules are incorporated in the crystal lattice of solid are called as solvate. And the solvate are of different crystalline form. When the solvent is in association with the drug is water, and such solvate are called as hydrate. Anhydrous form is having greater solubility than hydrated form. Example, in case of anhydrous form of theophylline having higher aqueous solubility, and organic solvent having greater aqueous solubility than non-solvate. Example, chloroform solvate of glyceryl is having greater aqueous solubility than non-solvate. Fifth factor is salt form of the drug. Most drugs are either weak acid or weak base. Generally, with weakly acidic drugs, a strong base salt is prepared, such as sodium salt and potassium salt of barbiturate and sulfonamide. And in case of weakly basic drug, we are producing a strong acid salt like hydrochloride or sulfate salt of several alkaloidal drugs. Here we have to consider the influence of salt formation. The influence of salt formation can be explained by considering the pH of the diffusion layer. The pH of a diffusion layer is higher than the free acid form, and the increase and decrease in pH of the diffusion layer attributed to the buffering action. For enhancing the solubility, we have to precipitate the drug as fine particle, and the principle of in situ salt formation is utilized to enhance the dissolution. Example in case of aspirin and penicillin from buffered alkaline tablet. This buffered alkaline tablet having advantages, that is to reduce the gastric irritation and can overcome the hydrolytic stability problems. The factor influencing the solubility is the size of the counter ion. Generally speaking, the smaller the size of counter ion, greater the solubility of the product. Example, in case of sodium salt of novobiosine. The larger size also helpful in some cases, that is example to prolong the duration in case of steroidal salt as well as to overcome the bad taste in case of chloramphenicol patate. Sixth factor is the drug pKa and lipophilicity and GI-pH, that is simply pH partition hypothesis. The pH partition theory explained, that is, they state that for drug molecule having weight greater than 100, which are primarily transported across the biomembrane by passive diffusion, and the process is governed by three factors, that is pKa, that is dissociation constant of the drug, Ko by W, the lipid solubility of the unionized drug, and pH at the absorption site. Only unionized fraction of drug is sufficiently soluble can permeate the membrane until the equilibrium is attained. Based on that, the basic concepts are: the lower the pK of an acidic drug, the stronger the acid, and higher the pK of the basic drug, the stronger the base. At particular pH, the percentage of drug ionized can be explained by the Henderson-Hasselbalch equation. That is, for weak acids, pH is equal to pKa plus log concentration of ionized drug divided by unionized drug. That is, percentage of drug ionized is equal to 10 raised to pH minus pKa divided by 1 plus 10 raised to pH minus pKa into 100. Whereas for weak bases, pH is equal to pKa plus log concentration of unionized drug divided by ionized drug, and therefore percentage of drug ionized is equal to 10 raised to pKa minus pH divided by 1 plus 10 raised to pKa minus pH into 100. From pH partition hypothesis, we can come into conclusion that for weak acid, very weak acid, that is ionized at all pH, pKa greater than 8, such as phenytoin, ethosuximide, etc., they are unionized at all pH value, and therefore absorption is rapid and independent of GI-pH. If the pKa is between 2.5 to 7.5, the absorption is pH dependent. Example, several NSAID like aspirin, ibuprofen, etc. They are exist in unionized form and absorb at acidic conditions of stomach. For stronger acid, that is having pKa value less than 2.5, such as cromolyn, sodium, etc., ionize in the entire pH range of GIT and remain poorly. For basic drugs, very weak bases unionized at all pH. That is, the absorption is rapid, independent of the GI fluid. Example in case of caffeine, theophylline, and number of benzodiazepine. For bases having pKa in between 5 to 11 are greatly affected by changes in pH and is pH dependent. And example, morphine, analog, chloroquine, etc. are better absorbed from alkaline conditions of intestine, and they largely exist in unionized form. For stronger bases having pK value greater than 11, they ionize at entire pH range of GIT and therefore poorly absorbed. Besides pKa, there is a term that is ST, that is total aqueous solubility, is an important factor. It is defined as the sum of concentration of the ionized drug in solution and concentration of unionized drug in solution. And the solubility of unionized form is known as the intrinsic solubility of the drug. Seventh factor, the lipophilicity and drug absorption. It is the pKa of the drug that determines the degree of ionization at a particular pH, and only the unionized drug is sufficiently lipid soluble. It is absorbed into the systemic circulation. If the drug exists in unionized form, it will be poorly absorbed if it is having poor lipid solubility. Ideally, for better absorption, the drug should have sufficient aqueous solubility. A perfect hydrophilic-lipophilic balance should be there in the structure of the drug for optimum bioavailability. The lipid solubility of a drug is measured by a parameter called as log P, where P is the oil in water partition coefficient value of the drug. This value is a measure of degree of distribution of drug. The limitations of pH partition hypothesis, that is, this pH partition hypothesis is oversimplify the complicated process of drug absorption and is having its own limitation. The deviations from the theory are presence of virtual membrane pH, absorption of ionized drug, influence of GI surface area and residence time, and presence of aqueous unstilled diffusion layer. Presence of virtual membrane pH. The concept is that only unionized drug at a given pH is absorbed. But actually, we can find out an S-shaped curve, pH absorption curve. Here also, the dissociation of the drug is obtained. This is a variation. That is, differences in the extent of absorption can be seen, example in case of salicylic acid. And the pH absorption curve shows a less T, that is shift to the left in case of acidic drug and to the right for the basic drug. This virtual pH or microclimate pH determines the extent of drug ionization. Second deviation is the absorption of ionized drug. An important assumption is that only unionized form is absorbed and permeated. But the thing is that here we can find unionized form of the drug is absorbed and permeated of the ionized drug is negligible, since its rate of absorption is 3 to 4 times less than an unionized drug. This is called as non-ionic diffusion. That is, sometimes there is change or negligible effect is there. That is, ionized drugs show rate of absorption more. That is the principle of non-ionic diffusion. This principle is true in case of ionized drug having low lipid solubility and relatively poor permeability. If such drugs having large lipophilic group in the structure despite the ionization, they will be absorbed passively. Example, morphine and third deviation is influence of GI surface area and residence time of the drug. According to pH partition theory, acids are or acidic drugs are best absorbed from stomach and basic drugs from intestine. This could be true under condition where the surface area of stomach is same. But irrespective of the GI, pH and degree of ionization, both acidic and basic drug is absorbed from the intestine. Primarily because of its large surface area and secondly because of the long residence time of the drug in the intestine. Fourth deviation, the presence of aqueous unstilled diffusion layer. Here we can say that the bulk of the luminal fluid is not in direct contact with membrane, but there is a barrier exists and barrier can be called as aqueous unstilled diffusion layer. And this aqueous unstilled diffusion layer has a real thickness and acts as a barrier to absorption. So this drug must pass through this layer first and diffuse through this layer, and diffusion through this aqueous unstilled diffusion layer can be the rate limiting. Eighth physicochemical factor is the drug stability. A drug for oral use may destabilize either during its shelf life or in the GIT. Two major stability problems are there, resulting in the poor bioavailability, that is, the degradation of the drug into inactive form and interaction with one or more different component. And this can be better we are discussing in the formulation factors and patient related factor. Ninth physicochemical factor is the stereochemical nature of the drug, that is the chirality. The chiral drugs constitute approximately 60% of the drug, and these chiral drugs are mostly marketed as racemic mixtures. Here, among these chiral drugs, we are checking in which way this chirality affects the process like absorption, distribution, etc. Second thing is that in case of enantiomers possess identical physical and chemical properties despite differences in the spatial configuration. Thus, the biological process is a passive in nature, do not display selectivity for one isomer. However, this biological process such as protein binding, which require interaction of a drug with the macromolecule, that is the biological process like protein binding which require interaction, may exhibit stereo selectivity of the drug. By this topic, I am ending this session of this absorption pattern. This chapter is a vast chapter among the biopharmaceutics subject. So, in the coming session, we can discuss in detail the remaining factors that affect the absorption. Thank you for the watching. I think you will subscribe my channel. Thank you once again. Thank you for your watching.